Oh, yeah, what it is, what it do, DJ Nation fam. We are coming at you live. It's the Week 15 NFL DFS breakdown here on the DJ Nation podcast, powered by the Fantasy Authority. And you're looking at the two box there. We're throwing it back in the time capsule with me and Kev Steele going at each other on a two-man pod as Maddie unfortunately had to sit this one out. We wish him a speedy recovery as he's fighting that flu bug. And, obviously still going to be building lineups. So if you guys want Maddie's takes, you definitely are going to want to be in that Discord. The link is in the description, guys. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you get in there, get in on the action. We got a lot of football still left in the season, even with it being week 15. The fantasy playoffs have kicked off. The best ball playoffs have kicked off, and we still have a lot left to uncover. So make sure you guys are getting in on the action with the DJ Nation fam. What up, Marco? I see you in the chat there, coming in live. You know how we do it, late on a Friday, getting the final thoughts at you guys before the Saturday inactives come out, before the Sunday inactives come out, and we could build these lineups. But, no need for me to do the talking, as we'll probably still go an hour and 30 minutes, even with it being a two-man pod. Welcome in the Godfather himself, Mr. Kevin Steele at Fantasy Route 13 is where you can find him on Twitter and X. Kev, how you doing today? We got a fun week 15 slate to break down for the people.
Yeah, first of all, I'm really disappointed, Maddie. He could have had his Jordan flu game, with this squad, he missed a perfect opportunity, but it is what it is, he wants to be sick. Anyways, we'll hold it down. But,
always
this slate I think is kind of really interesting, because we were kind of talking about it before the show, but if you look at ownership this week, it's drawing towards I thought going into it, despite how expensive to stack the game is, that the Bills and Lions game was going to draw a bunch of ownership, because it just has by far the highest totals on this slate. I mean, it's a 54.5 point total. The next closest is 46.5 points. And so I just felt like this game was going to draw a ton of ownership, and it's not. At least as of right now, or all the ownership projections we're looking at, and maybe we're wrong, right? Maybe that we come back and on Sunday, once we turn over the cards and we see actual ownership, that this game is a lot more popular than what they're getting credit for, because everybody, Josh Allen, who's coming off a game where he scored 55 points last week against the Rams, is I think he's projected for 5% ownership. We're getting, Jahmyr Gibbs, who was arguably a really good play, at 4% ownership. The only really highly owned player there is Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's drawing 10% ownership right now, and then Shakir is drawing about 10% ownership, and that's about it. I felt like this game was going to be the highest one of the slate, and I was wanting to go somewhere else. But I will say it is really hard to stack this game up. I played around with it. But one way that I have found that I kind of like is just playing Josh Allen naked, because Josh Allen can get there on his own. We saw him last week with the 11 rushing touchdowns, or 11 to 3 rushing touchdowns that he had. The 3 rushing touchdowns that he had last week. He has started to run the ball at a very high rate. And just the way that the Lions play defense, that they play a ton of man coverage, that I think it really opens itself up. We know that, since Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator, has been there, that he has been somebody that has given up a ton of rushing yards to quarterbacks in his time there with this iteration of the defense. And so, I think it really opens itself up to maybe playing a Josh Allen naked lineup with a Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown, and do a stack like that. Because it is tough to try to, because now you have Keon Coleman back, you have Dalton Kincaid back, so you have all these pass catchers trying to figure out who it is. The one that stands out the most to me on the Bills side is Khalil Shakir, because we know the Lions are a pass funnel defense to the slot. That's where they try to funnel everything. But the Bills are the same way. They try to funnel everything into the slot, into the middle of the field, and so these two defenses are pretty similar in a lot of ways. But it's hard not to love Josh Allen with what he's been doing, because, since week 10, he's had 50, 55, 18, and 82 rushing yards. He has a rushing touchdown in all those games as well. So he can get there not just through the air, but also on the ground.
Yeah, and I mean, it's coming up, like you said, I mean, the performance last week was absolutely incredible. 10 for 82 on the ground against the Rams there. And in the way that I think Aaron Glenn will have this Detroit defense playing a little bit aggressively. So that might even allow for more rushing opportunities for Josh Allen. We've seen I don't know what's going on with the backfield there. They kind of were reliant on James Cook there for a little bit, getting Ray Davis worked in, and even some of these other guys, like Tyler Johnson and such, not even in the run game, but just opportunities. But it seems to be that that's kind of fallen by the wayside, and they really have been asking for Josh Allen to, dust off the Superman cape and see what he can do to try and, pretty much solidify this MVP season that he's having and get them to the promised land. Just incredible what this offense and team has been able to do with everything that was kind of talked about in the offseason with them moving on from Stephon Diggs and kind of maybe like it's going to be taking a step back. That has not been the case, and you can see Allen playing freely now. So yeah, I mean, that game, it really steps out leaps and bounds, Kev, and like you said, it is tough to build around that Buffalo and Detroit game, just with how all the pieces are kind of priced up. So it really does feel like a game, kind of similar to last week with the Rams. We had talked about it on the show. It's like, yeah, that game really stands out as the best game to get to, but look how high priced everybody is. But by the time, we discussed it on Friday, kind of thinking like, okay, wow, we might have, we're probably going to have Isaac Guerrero as a value piece. We could also have Zach Charbonnet as a value piece. So that kind of really opened up pathways to get to the Rams and Buffalo game if you really wanted to. But I think people just kind of forgot about it as far as game stacking that game and really just try to get as many other okay, now I can play those two guys with Saquon. I can play, these high price wide receivers, not necessarily thinking about that Buffalo and Rams game really going off the way that it needed to, or the way that, it could have been projected to. And that could be another situation with Buffalo and Detroit, but we just had a Thursday night football game that was projected to be a bonanza. And we get a 12-6 showing with the Rams and the 49ers. So it's like, do people look at that and think that, oh man, like, look at what the highest total outcome could potentially be. Could be a clunker. Like, I'd spend all my money on that. Is that the way to go? And you talked about the top. We do have a lot of chalk pieces on the slate that people might be wanting to get to as opposed to that game. I do like your idea of playing Josh Allen naked though, because we've seen it time and time again that he can do it all himself. Shout out to everybody who's coming in here watching our Week 15 NFL DFS breakdown. We're going to start it off at quarterback, but wanted to shout out to everybody who is watching live here as we record on a Friday going into the main slate there. Just want to give you guys our thoughts on where we're seeing the slate before the weekend comes up, before the inactives, and anybody who's watching live and spending your Friday night with us, get those drinks flowing, get ready to rock, sit back in your seat. Even though it's a 2-man and Maddie's sitting this one out, me and Kev got you guys covered here. So Kev, when we talk about quarterback on this slate, man, it really feels ugly to me. Kind of similar maybe in a couple ways to last week, but I mean, even more like the running back, when we talk about that, like that is just the position of gold. It's been that way for now 2 weeks in a row of just so many good plays. The difference is that most of the good plays, I shouldn't say most, but the clear best plays that we were looking at, we were like, okay, look at this value that we're going to be having at running back. Like, how can you not play, how can you think about not playing these guys at these prices when it allows you to do so much with your lineup? And we have good plays at running back, but they're sitting in the 6K and up range. So like it still makes it tough to be building around the game environments that we want to build around. So I think there are some decision points, but nothing comes first before you think about your quarterbacks in your stacks and where you go. And if I'm not going to be playing that Detroit and Buffalo game, I definitely got to look at this Miami and Houston game. And this is another game that's tough to build around, Kev. I mean, the pieces that you want there, like Tua's cheap. Stroud's pretty cheap, 6,100, 6,200 respectively. But I mean, Nico Collins, you're paying 8,100 for. Tyreek Hill, you're paying 7,400 for. Jonnu Smith is the third highest priced tight end on the slate. Always got to be interested in Devon Achane with his role. He's the third highest priced running back on the slate. It definitely makes it tough to get to the guys who you want. But again, if this game goes nuclear, this is a game that's inside the dome. This is a Miami team that has really just shown a propensity to not even care about running the ball. Like they're just using Devon Achane as another pass catcher out there and letting Tua just cook. Tua's been absolutely on a tear since he's been back from the concussion. You really love to see it with 40 pass attempts in 3 straight games. I mean, the writing's on the wall there that he could really put up a stellar game against this offense. Tua would be the route that I'd be leaning to go over CJ Stroud. It's really easier to fit, like a Nico Collins is just that one piece who can get all the volume, as opposed to on the Miami side where Tua can still spread it around a little bit, but there's so many playmakers that I'd want to take shots on. That's a game that's really standing out for me from, the quarterback perspective. I'm always going to have interest in Baltimore. I mean, they're 29.5 implied total, makes you definitely interested in getting pieces on this slate. Josh Allen was pretty much the only quarterback that could really, putting up 55 is crazy, but he could really put the slate out of reach last week. But now we have a Lamar Jackson going against this Giants team who is pretty much dead in the water, even with it being on the road there. Like it's going to be a real interesting spot to see, what the Ravens are able to do and a get right spot before they get into some more heavy play. And then the third game, Kev, before I toss it to you, that I'm interested in, but only on one side, and that's the Cincinnati and Tennessee game. Now, I think there might be some weather expected in that game. It's Cincinnati on the road. They're still controlling their playoff destiny by being able to, Joe Burrow's been going God mode. It really just hasn't mattered much because this defense is absolute shit and trash. But the way Joe Burrow's been playing, like, how can you not have interest in what this dude is doing right now? You got to pay up for him. Again, it makes it tough. But the Tennessee pieces are cheap enough that the stack makes a little bit of sense. He's been on the absolute heater as well. I mean, I talked about Tua with his best attempts. Like Joe Burrow's hit the 50 mark, 56 mark. And Chase Brown is kind of utilized in that same function as HN, as he can be that pass catcher too. So with Joe Burrow being on a heater, it feels silly not to want to get exposure to him. But how are you seeing the slate, Kev, and where are you going to be going to spots if you're not going to that Buffalo-Detroit game at the quarterback position?
Yeah, I completely agree with you with the Joe Burrow talk. I mean, they're just throwing the ball at an absurd rate. I mean, over his last 4 games, he's throwing the 56 pass attempts, 50, 38, and 44. So, they're just absolutely letting him air it out. He's thrown 3 or more touchdowns in 5 straight games as well. So, he's just been absolutely balling. He's hit the 300 mark, in 4 straight games as well. So, he's checking all the boxes you're wanting to. Again, also a little bit harder to stack because Burrow's 7,300. And then if I'm stacking it, it's Burrow, Chase Brown, and then whatever pass catcher you want to get to, whether it's Jamar Chase or T. Higgins. I think that's the path because they're throwing the ball at such a high rate to Chase Brown. He's seeing almost 7 targets a game. So, I definitely think that is where I would go. I think in terms of a pay down options, right? Who are you going to pay down for? If you want to avoid the really expensive running backs like Josh Allen and Joe Burrow, the two most owned quarterbacks on this slate are Kyler Murray and Justin Herbert. And I don't know what to think about it. Kyler Murray worries the hell out of me, but I will say it is a great matchup at home against New England. New England's defense has been terrible this year. They've allowed, 20 plus DK points in 3 straight games they played. Their defense is not great. So we have seen some semblance of ceiling games from Kyler. Scored 28 a few weeks ago against the Jets where they put it on them. He can definitely get you there. And then you also have Justin Herbert, who's getting Ladd McConkey back. He's only 5,900. That still feels like too cheap for him. But he is dealing with some injuries. He's dealing with this ankle, thigh injury that he's dealing with. So does he run his ball as much? Obviously, on the other side of that, that could end up being the game environment we look back on that, we should have had more interest in this game because this Chargers and Bucks game. Because one, we know the Bucks defense is especially their pass defense is not very good. They allow a ton of big games to quarterbacks. We've seen this. I mean, Bryce Young just recently, had good games against them. And so Justin Herbert, especially with McConkey back, sounds like McConkey's going to play. Then I think that kind of opens the door. But he's also going to be one of the most highly owned quarterbacks on the slate at 5,900. But I think good leverage off of Chuba Hubbard, who right now is currently being projected almost have 40% ownership, could actually be Bryce Young. We've seen Bryce Young in this offense play a lot better recently, and he's he hasn't hit a major ceiling, but he hit 23 a few weeks ago against Tampa Bay. And he's actually running the ball a little bit too, but he's only 5,300. You pair him with Adam Thielen. I don't mind getting there because we got to find somewhere to get some value on this slate because
Right.
we already said there's no running back value at all this week, at least not anything like there was last week. And wide receiver, once you get below the 5K range, there's not a lot there. There's a couple of guys here and there, but like nobody that's obvious that stands out there with those players. And so, like maybe it is just paying down at quarterback this week, finding that cheaper quarterback play like a Bryce Young, maybe a Jameis Winston who's 5,500. Like you go there and then you try to pay up for some of the higher priced players in some mini stacks and stuff like that. Maybe that's the path.
Yeah, I mean Bryce Young is really interesting, and I was looking at him at the beginning of this week and kind of got away from it. But when you're looking at the production that they've been, and like these haven't been against scrub ass teams. Like he's been performing above expectation against elite opposing defenses, and now he gets this Dallas team that they just lost the key piece in the Cincinnati game on their defense. They really aren't playing for anything. They're unraveling at the name of the game, and I believe Carolina's like a favorite in this game for the first time. They're a favorite for the first time in 2 years.
In like 34 games or something like that.
Yeah, 34 games. It's insane. So yeah, I really like that call, Kev. Like, I mean, look at what Adam Thielen's been doing. We talk about him at wide receiver, but like he's 5,400, 21 targets in his past 2 games. Like he definitely has carved out a role for himself and really has been that blanket for Bryce Young to be able to lean on. And these are the type of spots, especially like on a slate like this. Like, yeah, we do have Josh Allen, we do have Lamar, we do have Jalen Hurts, but like with so many other good skill position spots, like if we can get, hopefully you're one in that 20 to 25 range out of Bryce Young, at a minimum. And then, these other guys to put up the same, like to not get to that 40, 35, 40 point threshold. And then we might be able to cook with something here if we get the pieces right on Carolina. So definitely like that call out by you at Bryce Young. He's clear in a way, the best option. I feel like under 6K. I do want to talk about Jameis before we even consider moving it on, because this dude, all he does is pass, right? And like it is a Jekyll and Hyde type of thing with him where you saw it against Pittsburgh, you see it in other games against Denver. Like he's gonna gunsling. That's just his nature. That's just his mentality. That's what he does. And that could lead to turnovers, or that could lead to big plays. And like it's the same thing every time. And you could see, like, if you've been watching the in-season Hard Knocks in the AFC North, like Kevin Stefanski just kind of holds his breath on the sideline, but he doesn't really say anything about. It's like, yeah, that's shitty when he throws an interception, but he knows what Jameis is capable of. So it's like, all right, just go back out there, watch what you're throwing at. Like, don't do a double pump fake to where the defensive line is reading your eyes and they can pick you off. But against Kansas City, who, this is not a defense that I usually look to target at all, because they just are able to just keep things in front of them and really don't seemingly give up plays. But when they're facing a quarterback like Jameis, who's just going to keep, being reliant on moving this ball against them, I think the only way is maybe to keep him off the field. I don't know, Kev. You could probably talk to that better, but he's such a cheap stat. Like with David Njoku potentially being out, maybe he's already been ruled out. Like we get a cheap tight end there. The pass catchers are still cheap with Cedric Tillman being out. Like we have just a clear path to where we could, build around this game. Now the other thing on the flip side is like the Kansas City Chiefs just really haven't needed to do much offensively in the games that they've been playing in, where they haven't been, they've been forced to do just enough to win, but really haven't been pushed to the pace of like, all right, we need 24, we need 30. So that's a little bit, but like, there's still some interesting pieces on the Kansas City Chiefs that make that game an interesting stack. What do you think about a Jameis build this week?
Yeah, you mentioned it's a very cheap stack. The Chiefs defense hasn't really been the same, especially since they lost Jalen Watson. I mean, since like week 7, week 8, and they still haven't really been getting great pressure on quarterbacks this year, which has really exposed them, because last year they were one of the top pressure rate teams. They were one of the top teams in sacks, and they were getting home, and it covers up a lot of issues if you have a weak secondary. I mean, they still have Trent McDuffie, but even McDuffie's kind of playing out of position. Like he probably is much better suited to be playing as like a slot corner, which is what he did last year. They're not doing that with him this year, and so he's having to play outside. But their corners have just not held up. I mean, they've had a ton of injuries there as well. I mean, they're onto their like practice squad guys in their secondary right now. I mean, they've called up multiple practice squad guys to cover these spots right now. Their safeties aren't really equipped to play the way that they normally do, or the way you would want to see. They don't have a free safety, which hurts this defense. And so, like, that's why you see so often if you watch a Chiefs game, like their corners never have their head turn around, never are tracking the ball, and so they get beat so often deep. And so, like, this game could really set up for Jameis Winston to be able to throw all over them, like, because we've seen this before. We saw AOC 2 weeks ago throw for like 340 yards and 2 scores,
right,
against them. Like, it's not out of the range of possibility that Jameis Winston could throw for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, the only thing that we'll have to monitor with this game is the weather. There is some chance of some weather issues with this game. It doesn't look like anything crazy right now. It's like 10 to 15 mile an hour winds, which isn't that big of a deal. And then looks like there might be a little bit of rain, but we'll have to see on that, because that could kind of change it if you get more wind and stuff like that, where maybe you don't want to. But it is kind of wild that you have a Chiefs game and nobody's interested in it. But that's because the Chiefs have made it so boring, and so like all these games are just gross, and like you just really haven't had much ceiling games from them or on the other side.
right. Yeah, no, it is kind of interesting to think about. I mean, we only have 2 games this season where Patrick Mahomes has scored over 20 DK points. So, like, we just really haven't seen it. But if there's going to be any environment like that, it could, and possibly like we could get Jameis turning the ball over, leading the short fields, and maybe that's what helps get the Kansas City offense going. I mean, you kind of talked about a pre-show with me, Kev, but like, the Chiefs could be in a position where they have everything locked up after this week, or they could still be needing to do more down the stretch. And like, I don't think they want to go in to the playoffs the way that these AFC teams are kind of playing right now, or just in general, the way that offenses are starting to heat up with their with things not clicking on cylinders. So this could be a spot where it's like, all right, let's get a little bit more going. Let's get our confidence back, and let's try and, work some magic as we get into postseason play. Yeah, it's an interesting one. And, we haven't really talked about the Chiefs in that nature, but one I want to keep my eye on, because we just have to look at some other environments that are a little bit different that could pop off with the way the slate is shaping up. Is there anything else at quarterback that you wanted to touch on before we move on to running back position?
No, I think it's pretty straightforward. Like, I think it's figure out a way to get to Josh Allen or into that game environment. I don't mind the Jared Goff side either, but that could be a little more volatile. Joe Burrow for sure. I think he is definitely somebody that I'm going to have interest in. I definitely want to have interest in the Miami-Houston game as well. I prefer the Tua side a little bit more than CJ Stroud, just more so. I just don't have as much confidence in Stroud of the way he's played this year. But I do think the Tua side is definitely there. And then, like I said, if I'm going to pay down, I think I'm going to look at either probably Bryce Young. Like, I really don't mind Bryce Young. He's super cheap, $5,300. Like, he has 20-point upside within him, and if he can get there, and really kind of comes down to like, do any of these games go absolutely nuclear like the Bills game did? If we don't get that, then Bryce Young could definitely be in play, and then allow you to play him for a lot of these other guys, because I guess we could talk about like the running backs. Like, the running backs are phenomenal this week. There are so many running backs that I want to play this week. But right now, like quarterback, like there's not a lot that just absolutely stands out to me, jumps off the page that you have to absolutely have. And then, like you said, it really makes you have a very thin and narrow build if you're going to play like the Lions game, or even the Dolphins and the Texans game. Like, you're pretty thin in what you're going to have. And I think you're going to run into a situation where all these lineups are very similar, because you're basically building the same lineups, because like the Texans game, like the players that make the most sense, like, I don't have that much interest in playing Tank Dell. Like, I don't mind him if he's part of a stack or something like that. But like, I don't love him as a one-off. But like, Nico Collins is like, I think could absolutely smash in this game. Right. And then you have the Tyreek side, which Houston has been terrible at allowing deep balls this year. I know we haven't seen it. This team has went ultra conservative and kept everything underneath. They haven't opened it up, but we could see something like that within this game. So you want to play Tyreek, but Tyreek's 7,400. Like, you talked about all that, but it makes it really tough to get to some of these guys because of the way that it is. So if I'm going to find a different path, it probably would be through Bryce Young, or maybe a Kyler Murray or Justin Herbert. But those two guys are going to be the highest on quarterbacks in the slate.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. And yeah, we, wish Maddie was on was on the show, because when Kyler and Justin Herbert are coming in as a chalk, we know he's looking elsewhere. Just not gonna usually get to those guys. So it is a fun week for our style of play, Kev, as we MME, to be underweight on these guys, at least from my standpoint, because it just, when especially week 15, we're getting into the holidays, like people are kind of, they're worried about their redraft teams. They're thinking about fantasy playoffs. They're thinking about the holidays. Like, they're not in the weeds grinding so much from a DFS standpoint. So it's really going to be, I think people are going to be reliant on ownership and projections even more so than ever, especially with it, especially coming off the week like last week, where so much of good chalk shaped up for us late in. And when there's so many question marks and unknowns, people are like, all right, well, let me just click in the highest projected plays and work it from there. So this is a week where I'm definitely interested in getting different. And we'll talk about the running back position now, because like it was a week that, through this week shaping up, and it's like, okay, like, yeah, you got Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dowdle in the same game, who are 6,500, 6,100 respectively. And it's like, these guys do have just such a clear path to get to 20, like in the matchup. I mean, we've just seen it time and time again with these two teams, the defenses on these two teams just being able to get gashed on the ground. And I'm not one to usually like last week, it was different because they were so cheap, but it was like, all right, now that we have Garindo and Charbonnet, like, I'm just not taking chances on other dudes. Like, I'm just gonna take chances on game environments. And I was lucky to come into a Sam Darnold double, but like I wasn't able to get to that Buffalo and Rams game. But you definitely could have, because of those two pieces. And it's like, for this week, like, they're 65 and 6,100. Like, they're not. They're good. They're great on paper plays, but it's like, if we're going to get 40% ownership, 30% ownership on these guys, I got to look for ways to get different. And even in that same range, Kev, like, talk about Brian Robinson Jr. He's 6,200. Like, he has a defined role. Austin Eckler's been on IR. Like, they're playing the Saints. Like, he should be able to smash in this spot. I know we don't talk about the upside of this guy a lot, but if Kyler Murray's going to be chalk, like James Conner, I have to have interest in him. He's at home, going against New England. Like, we know he's touchdown dependent, but like, he can definitely get there. And the way that this red zone offense has been playing and stalling out, like, they need this guy to get going in order to score. He's only 6,600. I mean, even in, like, up to 7K, David Montgomery in that late game, to get to him, we know what he can do, even with Jahmyr Gibbs in the mix. Now, the thing that's interesting about this slate, Kev, more than ever, is like, look at the running backs on this slate. And usually talk about it pre-show, but because there's no buys this week, we're out of buys, don't have to worry about that anymore. We are getting a 12-game slate. We've been used to 10-game slates for a while, so this means we got Saquon Barkley. I mean, he's going against Pittsburgh in a tough matchup, but he's got a price discount this week of $400 at only 8,600. Derrick Henry, like, these are the spots where Derrick Henry just absolutely nukes, because nobody wants to play him, even though he's a road favorite. This team is implied for 29.5 points. He's going against the Giants. Like, he hasn't done shit for a while, but he's kind of been competing with Saquon Barkley for this rushing title. Like, could they just lean on him? And can people get to 8,300? I don't know, but I definitely want to take some shots on him, because we know what his upside is. We got Devon Achane at 7,900. Already talked about him. Joe Mixon, yeah, he's touchdown dependent, but he's been great all year, 7,800. And then Alvin Kamara is an interesting one, Kev, that I definitely want you to touch on for a little bit. And we'll talk about the cheap guys, of course, but Alvin Kamara has been chalk literally 5, 6, 7 fucking weeks in a row. And now nobody wants to play him. And they have the backup quarterback in Jay Kaner in. And Jay Kaner's only full start this year, Alvin Kamara got 11 targets. Like, Jay Kaner is not otherworldly. He is going to be peppering Alvin Kamara with targets all the time. This is exactly why we play Alvin Kamara from a DK standpoint. Yeah, we don't know if the touchdowns are going to be there or not, but we've been playing him for, that's what everybody wants to play him, because, it's his workload. And like, yeah, he's been disappointing, so to speak, but he's been uber popular as well. And now that he's not popular at all, he's cheaper than he was last week. He's going against a Washington team where they're going to need something to be working on the other side of the ball. Like, there's no Taysom Hill anymore. Like, Alvin Kamara really, jumps out. And I don't know if I'll get to him, Kev, but it's like one of those spots where like, okay, if nobody's playing him now, I definitely want to get to him because his shot at getting 20 is like so far in the range of outcomes for me with Jake Haener being at quarterback. It's not even funny because we see this time and time again with the backup coming in. And then it's like, okay, what if he does start, scoring touchdowns? Like we see, right around, I think it was like 5 years ago or something like that, like Christmas time comes around, Alvin Kamara fantasy playoffs, like 3 touchdown game. He's definitely one that just jumps out the page for me. So, like I said at the top, it's usually a week or it's usually a slate like this where I want to be. I'm not caring about chalk as much at running back because, they're usually going to be good plays. Rico and Chuba are good plays, but I think I need to be thinking about ways to get different. And I'm definitely going to do that in the price range and even possibly playing up. And we have some interesting pieces to talk about pay it down. But what are you doing this week at running back, Kev?
I mean, first of all, you mentioned Derrick Henry, and like you said, like this is prime. We're in December. It is cold outside. Like this is Derrick Henry weather right now, where Derrick Henry absolutely annihilates. And I will say, since week 8, he hasn't been as good, like you mentioned. He went from weeks 1 through 7, averaging almost 130 rushing yards per game, and 6.51 yards per carry, and 8 touchdowns through that span. And since week 8, he's averaging 89 rushing yards per game. He still has scored 5 touchdowns. So we have seen a drop, but a lot of that's been to game script because they've fallen behind a lot more recently. But this matchup is a dream spot against the Giants. The Giants are absolutely horrendous against running backs. They've allowed, since week 9, they've allowed 141.6 rushing yards per game, 8 touchdowns, 7.8% explosive run rate allowed, which tells you because what does Derrick Henry do the best is break off these long runs. And then on top of that, it is absolutely wild that they are actually best in the league at yards before contact per attempt with only a 0.82. So they are getting, to the running back in less than a yard. So they are getting back there, but then they are worse in the league at yards after contact because they can't tackle with a 2.93 yards after contact. And if you can't tackle, the one player that I would not want to be facing in that situation is Derrick Henry. So Derrick Henry absolutely could go nuclear. The only thing that you worry about with Derrick Henry, though, is just he's not involved in the passing game, and he really has to score touchdowns. So if he doesn't score a couple touchdowns at that price, like that's how he kills you. If he goes out and rushes for 200 and 2 scores, that's how he's going to kill you. But if he rushes for 140 but only gets 1 touchdown, I don't know if that's enough at that price to be able to absolutely kill you. So that's the decision you're going to have to make, and it's going to be a tough one with all these passing situations that we want to try to get to be able to play them. I also think that Jahmyr Gibbs is an excellent play this week. Now, Gibbs and Monty are absolutely splitting touches right down the middle. I mean, it's almost identical in everything that they're doing. They're both playing roughly around 47% of the opportunities, 3.7 carries or 3.8 carries. One seeing 3 targets, the other one seeing 2.5 targets per game. They're both top 10 in red zone touches this year. Like, it has been absolutely spit down the middle. Now, where Jahmyr Gibbs has been better, he has been far more efficient with his opportunities. He is first in explosive run rate, 12th in elusive rating, and 4th in yards per touch this year. And he's 10th in yards after contact per attempt as well. Now, the Bills, obviously, we know that they are terrible. They've been terrible this year against running backs, and they've really been even more so bad against pass catching running backs. So they've allowed the second most receptions, third most receiving yards, and the most receiving touchdowns to running backs this year. They also allow the highest explosive run rate to running backs. So I think it sets up a little bit better for Gibbs than it does for Monty. Monty's caught up a little bit with Jahmyr Gibbs in terms of pricing, because now, I mean, Gibbs is 7,500, Monty's now 70 or 7K flat, where he was in like that 6K range. But I do prefer Jahmyr Gibbs to him. I completely 100% agree with you on Brian Robinson. I think he has excellent leverage off of Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dowdle. This is a phenomenal matchup against the Saints. The Saints have been terrible against opposing running backs this year. We know that. So they have the second lowest stuff rate, the 4th highest yards after contact per attempt. They allow the 5th most DK points this year to running backs. It is a phenomenal spot for Brian Robinson. And I get it because, the last time we saw them play, because they're coming off their bye, we did see him jump up in terms of routes run and those opportunities, because prior to Austin Eckler going down, he was only running about 20% of the routes. But last week, and the last time we saw this team play, now this was a game where they got, they absolutely blew the doors off of Titans. And so he pretty much got shut down after the first half. But overall in that game, he still ran almost 35% of the routes, which is a pretty decent jump for him. And so I think that there's a scenario where he is definitely the lead back in this backfield in this matchup here. And he should actually smash against the Saints. So I think he is excellent leverage off of the Uber chalk Chuba Hubbard because he's going to be very, very popular. Like I said, coming in at almost 40% ownership, where Brian Robinson's coming in at like 5 to 7% ownership right now. So I love Brian Robinson as a play off him. I also think that another running back that I like this week, kind of mentioned him, was James Conner. Phenomenal matchup against the Patriots. The Patriots have struggled this year, 10th highest yards before contact per attempt. They've also allowed top 12 in rushing touchdowns allowed and top 12 in DK fantasy points allowed this season. And what we saw, though, that was kind of interesting in week 14 for James Conner was in weeks 12 and 13, he handled about 60% of the snaps, 50% of the rush attempts with an 11% target share. But all of a sudden last week in week 14, he actually got a huge bump to 75% of the snaps, 80% of the rush attempts, and 60% of the routes. So if we see this kind of workhorse back, also Amari DiMercado got ruled out, so that should help a little bit because he's been mixing in. But James Conner should be a phenomenal play this week. So I love James Conner as well. And then the last one that I really like is Isaiah Pacheco. He's only 6K, and I think he's definitely a play. We saw last week he jumped up to 50% of the snaps, but he outcarried Hunt 14-5. Also was targeted 4 times and just 1 for Kareem Hunt. Cleveland has been terrible against running backs. That has not been good against running backs this year. And since week 9, they've allowed the 9th most rushing yards, tied for the most rushing touchdowns, the 3rd highest explosive run rate, the 3rd highest missed tackles forced per attempt, and the 6th highest yards before contact per attempt. And that sets up perfectly for Isaiah Pacheco, who, I was kind of surprised with how explosive he actually looked coming off that injury. I was not expecting that. And so, as he's one of the more explosive running backs in the league, and that has been the MO and the problem for Cleveland all year is allowing explosives. And so I think Isaiah Pacheco is a very sneaky play in that game, which could have some weather issues. So at 6K, Isaiah Pacheco, I think, is definitely in play. And if I was going to play anybody sub that, I was kind of monitoring what's going on with Bucky Irving because Rachaad White could be interesting at $5,800. But it's sounding like, because who returned to practice today, Bucky Irving could play this week. We'll see on that one. But other than that, there's not a lot, that I really feel really great about. The one guy I wanted to ask you about, though, is Breece Hall, who saw a major drop in price. He's $6,400. If we took the injury stuff out of this, if you could have told me you got Breece Hall against the Jaguars, who is one of the best, if not the best matchup for running backs this year, at $6,400, he would be 70% owned. But he's not, because everybody's afraid of the injury. And I kind of talked about this with Isaac Guerrero this past week, where everybody was afraid of him, on Showdown. And I was like, he was only a roster like 20%, 25%, something like that, sub 5% in the captain. And everybody was worried about the injury stuff and everything else, but he ended up playing the entire game and played almost every single snap. And so I'm not saying that's what Breece Hall is going to do, but this is just such an incredible matchup at $6,400. Do you have any interest in that?
Yeah, it was one where I wasn't. I had just seen that or just looked into that news coming into the slate because I was like, man, why are Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis not even being talked about in some places? But saw that he fully practiced today, so it's interesting, Kev, for sure, because we know that he still has shown an upside even with the way that Aaron Rodgers has been targeting these pass catchers. And, talked about it last week with Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. And lo and behold, it comes to fruition again. Now, the interesting thing that I think makes Breece Hall even more of a, wild card play is that this Jets team isn't playing for anything anymore. They are officially done. They're officially out of it. So who do they want? How do they want to play this game? Is Aaron Rodgers going to be like, oh, well, I'm still here, so I'm still going to get my guys involved. Like, we're going to go out here and show out when nobody cares about us, because we can just say fuck everybody and let's just, start running up the score against a Jacksonville team? Or do they like check out because everybody, Aaron Rodgers brought everybody in and he's like, all right, we're going to be leaving soon, so pack your bags and like come with me to the next place? Where does that leave Breece Hall? Like, I really don't know how to view it. But yeah, Kev, I mean, like you said, it's 6,400 in a spot where, like, if the dude's a go, like, he's an interesting GPP tournament play for sure. Because if he's out there, you got to think, like, I mean, this guy's a franchise cornerstone. Like, we don't know who the quarterback is even going to be, so they're not going to run him out there with a knee injury if he can't go at all. Now, what does that mean from a workload standpoint? Like, we don't know, but we're not in the nature of like predicting all of that shit. It's just like, he's going to be out there. He's 6,400. Nobody wants to play him. Like, yeah, we know what his upside could be. So it would probably take me like, I usually run like 3 max, so I probably wouldn't get there. But if I was playing like a 3 max or a 20 max, yeah, I would probably have 1 or 2 shares of Breece Hall for sure on those teams as leverage in the spot, because you don't have to go far when you're talking about pivot points to get to a guy like that. And an interesting an interesting team to run back on. We got a tight end on Jacksonville who's expected to be popular. Like, we got wide receiver who could potentially make sense for Jacksonville. So you get a nice little mini correlation there as well.
Yeah, I just think, I mean, I guess maybe the likeliest thing that we see from that is maybe it's like a 3-man committee where we see Breece and Braylon and Isaiah Davis all play. Because I felt like they were probably just going to shut him down at that point, right? Like, they're playing for nothing. And I felt like maybe they would actually shut him down. But man, I don't think they're going to, because I mean, obviously, I think the thing that we don't factor in for a lot of these players is like, they care about obviously their next contract and trying to get paid. He already missed an entire year, or not entire year, but almost half a season with the ACL. But this is like, it's tricky though, because like he's dealing with an injury in that same knee that he had surgery on. And so like, if something bad happens, like, I don't know, like, it feels like it'd be smarter to shut him down. But I guess that's the only drawback to it, is that it could end up being like a really gross 3-way committee. And we just and so maybe it doesn't make a lot of sense. But I will just say it is very tempting at only $6,400 to be able to get a shot at Breece Hall at 6,400, because like, it wouldn't shock me if he had 100 yards and a couple scores. Like, great matchup, everything aligns. But then at the same time, I could also see where he touches the ball 6 times, and I'm hating my life for ever even consider playing him.
Yeah, or the Jets go like this. It's still a spot where the Jets could like take advantage because Mac Jones is just fucking ass. So like he just might not be needed. But yeah, because of how, I mean, especially Isaiah Davis, like this kid, I think we're going to be talking about him come, the week 17, week 18 shows, and just loading up on him, because he really looks like a talent that they got there. But also Braylon Allen, like he's been a boss too. So yeah, they could just be working in pieces going forward, see what they got from these guys, and makes it tough. I'm surprised you didn't want to touch on Tyrone Tracy at all in this matchup. He's coming off a game with 10 targets. Now we get Tommy Cutlets back instead of Drew Lock. Like, it's going to be interesting here. I mean, the Baltimore game, like, he is game script agnostic, right? Like, this dude is going to be on the field if they're in a close game, if it's blown out, if they somehow have a lead against Baltimore, and like, people will be like, oh, there's no way that the Giants could beat Baltimore. Like, Baltimore, like they don't always show up in these spots where they're supposed to smash. So like, we can, I expect them to win. I expect them to win big. I wouldn't bet money on the Giants, but like,
the NFL, beat the Ravens earlier.
Yeah, Raiders went out there. So like, Tyrone Tracy's definitely been a bright spot for this team. Malik Neighbors has kind of been, voicing his frustrations here, but like, Tyrone Tracy's been a staple. He's 5,700. Like, I think he, I got to see where a lineup shake out, but like, in building a Tua, double stack team out because of with the run back of Nico, because of pricing, like, I was looking at jumping Chuba down to Tyrone Tracy for savings to get a team that I liked. He's interesting. And then also Tank Bigsby at 5,100. I think ETN's still in the mix there, but like, he's definitely shown a propensity to, be able to do do some things in limited touches, and they seem to be wanting to get him involved here. So he's an interesting piece as well too. I mean, both these aren't guys who are going to jump off the page by any means, but like if you're looking for ways to, if you need one more piece in that isn't getting you to the 6K range, how you feel about those guys?
I don't mind the Tyron Tracy thing. The only thing that worries me with him, you brought up, is just it's not a great matchup. I will say the Ravens recently have started to fall off a little bit against running backs, and like you mentioned, like he is like last week. I mean, he actually played. I think it was over 70% of the snaps. Like that was a little bit surprising because that's not really the role we'd seen as much from him. But yeah, I mean, I don't like hate it as a play because if he can continue to see like this crazy workload in the passing game. Like if he could, because that's what we've been waiting for. I mean, this is a former wide receiver. Like I just could not believe that they weren't utilizing him more in the passing game than what they were, and they finally did it last week. And he's still, I mean, 19 fantasy points or 19 DK points. If he, can get somewhere close to that again, then 5,700, then yeah, I think that he becomes an interesting play at that price. But he's really the lowest that I would probably have interest in going. Like I get it with the Tank Bigsby thing, 5,100. But I think it would take a game script where they're ahead. Like so, like if that's what you think is going to happen, then yeah, you could definitely get there. Because I think if they were to fall behind, they don't use Tank Bigsby in that way. They do not throw him the ball, and so that would worry me with that. And so like it just sucks. Just like we just don't have any like obvious value. Because I was like looking at like well maybe Gus Edwards, in this matchup, $5,300 against Tampa. It's not a terrible matchup, but he's not involved in the passing game at all either. And so, I thought the one that we really were going to get would have been Rachaad White because of the Bucky Irving situation, but then Bucky Irving returned to practice today. So I just don't really love any of the running backs, probably below Tyron Tracy.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And yeah, it's tough to get to any of these guys now. Which is unfortunate, especially when we're coming off of a week where we have two guys who are 54 and below who just absolutely smash. But that's the nature of the beast, and that's how we do it. Each week is a new week, and so we got to go back to the drawing board and figure it out. But yeah, I probably will be spending most of my time in the mid 7K to right around 6K range on running backs this week, just trying to either eating the chalk on a lineup where the rest of my team's different, or if it's getting chalky somewhere else, then I'll probably look at pivots on these running back spots, especially in the high dollar range. Trying to find ways in the high dollar range to get to the Henrys, the Barkleys, Achans for sure, and even Kamara. Because especially if these guys aren't getting owned, this is the week when I love to get to those guys. Shout out to CW89 in the chat. I saw he got brought in earlier. We were talking about the Breece Hall conversation of just like Garrett Wilson being safer than Hall. There's no question that Garrett Wilson is safer than Hall. This dude's been absolutely phenomenal this year. And like I said, Aaron Rodgers has been out there just, in DGAF mode, giving every target between the 20s, it seems like, to these two guys, and Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson. And Garrett Wilson coming in at 6,500, it really just seems ridiculous based off of what we've been seeing. I mean, I guess, yeah, like 21.4 last week and 9, 5, and 9 before that. But, when you're going through, like, you can comb through and see a couple, 27, 30s, like, we know what the potential is for this guy. And just the way that he, Jalen Ramsey, I mean, he just toasted this dude last week, just showing off the ball skills. It's been great to see him get some looks. So we're hoping to keep that alive there. But wide receiver is fun this week, Kev. Like, again, pay up options, like, people aren't getting to him. Like, people are not getting to Jamar Chase, and he just went out and just did God mode things yet again with 14 targets, I think is what he saw in that game. Or maybe it was 14 catches. Yeah, 14 catches on 18 targets. Like, ridiculous stat line that he put up against Dallas. And he's getting a Tennessee team that, like, yeah, we hadn't been targeting them all too much at the start of the season with wide receivers, but in the past couple of weeks, they've been giving up, some games for sure. So, him and T are interesting, but I think people will really get to T because it's such a price discount and he just got shut out. So I think people are talking themselves into that. And yeah, maybe there's some shadow coverage on Jamar Chase. I don't know, but it's still Jamar Chase. Nico Collins at the top, I definitely want to get to. AJ Brown, we talked about the squeaky wheel narrative pre-show that he could be facing this week. Even with Joey Porter Jr. on him, like he's going to be drawing penalties. I think like they could just utilize him in the same way that Chase was getting the ball. We saw the 49ers just do this with Debo. It didn't amount to much, but Kellen Moore is out there saying, yeah, they need to scheme more work to AJ Brown. It's just on Jalen Hurts to get him the ball. So if you want to put your hard-earned dollars betting on that, it's still AJ Brown. We know what he can do. St. Brown is always tough for me to get to. I just never get to this guy, like unless it's on island games. There's just so much volume that he needs to see to be able to pop off. But in a game environment like this Buffalo and Detroit game, like, yeah, definitely would have some exposure to him building around that game. Tyreek Hill at 7,400. Like we talked about it so many weeks on the show, and like chasing this guy, it's going to pop. Like last week, yeah, it did come to fruition, 31.1. I think you were the one to bring it up, Kev. Like nobody was talking about Tyreek Hill, and you were like, is this the week he puts up a 30 burger? He did. He's got a touchdown in 4 out of his last 5 games now. Like you love seeing 14 targets from him. Like we said, they can't run the ball worth a damn, and they don't try to. So if the volume's going to be there, definitely got interest in Tyreek Hill. The upper tier options are awesome. We got CeeDee Lamb. He's dealing with a little bit of an injury, but he's been peppered from Cooper Rush. Terry McLaurin is another interesting one with Noah Brown being ruled out. I could see people getting to him in that game environment, but 7,200, it's tough to pay that price tag for him. Before I pass it to you, Kev, I will say, like, we'll talk about the 6K range and below, but Cortland Sutton, man, like, and he's going to be popular. But it's like at 6,600, does it even fucking matter when you look at what this dude has been doing with Bo Nix in the past couple of weeks? 9 targets, 10 targets, 8 targets, 9 targets, 10 targets, 11 targets after that 0 burger that he put up against the New Orleans in week 7. Like he has been on an absolute tear, and the rapport that they've had has been definitely coming to fruition. They're coming off of their bye week. Like, maybe people forgot about Cortland Sutton. It doesn't seem like that because I know ownership projections are expecting him to be owned, but he's a great one-off piece. We didn't really talk about Bo Nix, but talk to me about Cortland Sutton because I love him this week, and definitely we'll probably have him on at least one of my 3 lineups, if not more. But also the high-priced guys and what's sticking out to you, Kev.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have interest in Cortland Sutton. He's really, after a really slow start to the season, I mean, he's really come on recently. I mean, with games of 23, 19, 14, 29, and 16. So, like, he's not overly expensive. I mean, he's definitely more expensive than what he was earlier in the season, but yeah. I don't think he's like restrictive or anything like that to be able to get to him. But at $6,600, in terms of the top price guys, it's hard not to love, both Jamar Chase and Nico Collins. I think both of these guys set up really well. Their matchups are phenomenal, especially for Jamar Chase and Nico Collins. I mean, Nico Collins should have more than what should be closer in terms of fantasy points per game to Jamar Chase than what he is. I mean, he's had 2 or 3 touchdowns. One that was like an 80-yard touchdown that was called back. It should have been a touchdown. Like, I mean, he's ran a little bit unlucky since coming back from that injury, but they're coming off their bye. This game could be fireworks, but love Nico Collins at 8,100. He is expensive. The thing with Amon-Ra St. Brown is like he's been really consistent, like getting you pretty solid production, but he only has the one game this year where like you had to have him against Jacksonville where he scored 41. Right. But other than that, like if he scores 20, he's not optimal even at $7,600. So I don't think you have to get there, though. I will say it is the best matchup, kind of like we already talked about. The Bills are a complete slot funnel. They funnel everything into the slot, which is obviously awesome for Amon-Ra St. Brown. And so, like, he could get there on his volume purely alone. But so I don't mind that. Mike Evans, I think, is definitely still in play. I just keep waiting for him since coming back from that injury to really go off. But the game environment really hasn't necessarily been there. I mean, last week they pretty much handled the Raiders. Same thing with the Giants. So, like, he hasn't had to do a whole lot. But in the one game that we saw where, they were pushed and, the team was involved, he saw 12 targets in that game, 8 catches, over 100 yards, and he scored for 28 DK points on that one. So I think this game sets up really nicely for Mike Evans as kind of an alternative to some of the more expensive plays here. And maybe we didn't really even talk about it, but maybe we should have talked about Baker. I mean, Baker has consistently been one of the top quarterbacks this year, who's still, a little bit lower owned at $6,400 priced, at his price still in the lower 6K range. So, but I really like Mike Evans here in that spot for him. I think Ladd McConkey makes a lot of sense against Tampa Bay. He's $6,300. Sounds like he should be back. I mean, definitely the favorite target for Justin Herbert. So at $6,300, I think it's pretty easy to get there. I already said if I was going to play a Bills wide receiver, the one I like the most, Khalil Shakir, is the Lions are also a slot funnel where they funnel everything in the slot. So that makes sense. Khalil Shakir has definitely been their highest guy there. Brian Thomas, $5,800. He's going to carry some ownership, but he should, because the Jets have just out of all the teams in the league that have continually went back to the too high safety stuff, the Jets haven't. The Jets can still consistently run single high safety at over 50% of the time, and that sets up really well for Brian Thomas. I mean, Brian Thomas should have another player that we talk about. Like, I feel like every time I watch, Red Zone, you get Scott Hansen coming on and saying, "Oh, look at this! Oh, no, Mac Jones just barely missed on what should have been a touchdown." Because Mac Jones has not done a very good job of getting the ball there. But if you can connect on one of those, like Brian Thomas can absolutely smash, at this cost at $5,800. So I think it really sets up well. And if you look at Brian Thomas last week, he had a 47% first read target share last week for him, 12 targets. So I think you really like that. And the game before that, the dude had almost 250 air yards in that game as well. So I just think Brian Thomas could absolutely smash it. Now, you don't even have Evan Ingram to worry about because he's out now. So it's Brian Thomas and Brian Thomas only, really, because you have Brenton Strange and some of the other guys they have. So I like Brian Thomas. Marvin Harrison, I think, is kind of sneaky here in this spot. He's seen 20 targets the last two games. I just have not gotten him right at all this year. I feel like every time that I want to play him, I play him, and he does nothing, and then I get off of him. And then all of a sudden he has a big game. But he's been harder to project. But still, I think he's
so fucking cheap, though.
Yes, that price feels very, very good to be able to get to him if you could fit him in. Adam Thielen, you already talked about. I don't have to go too much further into that. I think another one that's kind of interesting is, so I talked a lot about the Browns and how the Browns have really struggled with explosive plays. And they've done it through the air. They've done it on the ground. They have allowed by far the most explosive plays this year on defense. I kind of think Xavier Worthy's kind of interesting here. The Chiefs finally able to connect? He's $5,100, kind of like a one-off play, but he's been seeing more and more opportunity recently, 6, 7, and 6 targets. So they're getting him involved. And we've seen so many times this year where he should have connected on a long touchdown. Patrick Mahomes barely missed him. So as kind of just a one-off GPP play, I don't mind getting him there because like I said, the Browns really, really struggle with deep balls. And so I think that maybe Xavier Worthy could finally pop that and finally get him on there. So I don't mind that as kind of a one-off cheaper option there as well. So, and then we kind of talked about with the cheaper guys. Like Demario Douglas always makes sense, especially Arizona really struggles against slot corner or slot wide receivers. That has been they've allowed like the fourth most DK points to slot wide receivers this year. He's 4,500. Doesn't have an incredible ceiling. Tim Patrick's interesting. I don't know if I would want to play him as like a one-off. It would have to be inside of a game stack, but he kind of opens things up at $4,300. And then down in the 3K range, I don't really have a lot of interest in a whole lot. Maybe Jalen McMillan. You could maybe try to talk yourself into. Calvin Austin will always be in play, especially with like George Pickens out. Maybe Kayshon Boutte as a $3,500 punt. Maybe you can look there. I know CWI said Malik Washington, a decent punt at wide receiver now that OBJ is out. I don't think that OBJ really matters that much. I mean, he was very used sparingly anyway. But like, I guess you could maybe try to get there. But like, they're just so consolidated between Waddle, Achane, Tyreek, and Jonnu. I don't think there's a lot there for someone like Malik Washington.
Yeah, it'd be really tough outside of large field tournaments. If you're stacking up that game and you say, okay, I do want exposure to him, we'll talk about tight end, but like if you wanted to replace, like if you wanted to have 3, or maybe it's double with Tua, Tyreek, and then Malik cheaply, because I do think there's going to be some 3K wide receivers that do garner some ownership, and so Malik is interesting, but it had to be, we're talking about probably like well over 1,000 entries, before I would get to a Malik Washington team, but it definitely does make some sense. I mean, he does have he had a nice profile. Like this is, I think that they definitely want him, to be part of the future that they're building there. So like this is the time that we start to see guys like Malik Washington pop off. So I definitely wouldn't have interest in him outside of a game stack for sure. But in game stack, yeah, if you're playing in large field tournaments, like yeah, why not take a shot on Malik Washington over a guy like Woods on Cleveland, or the New England guys as Kev mentioned, who would likely be owned in that spot as opposed to him. Kev, I love that. I love that Worthy call, man. We haven't talked about Worthy in a minute. It feels like because of the Chiefs not being on the main slate or whatever. But yeah, that's definitely an interesting one. This is going to be an interesting slate to really get different at wide receiver. I feel like because there are some ways. I mean, the Chargers guys are going to be. You said that McConkey, you think he'll play in limited practices in a couple weeks in a row, but should something come to fruition there, like that could definitely open up something. Tim Patrick, I wish he was cheaper than 4,300 because I actually did have interest in him as a one-off of potentially getting a piece of that game, but it's going to make it tough. But without Khalif Raymond being out there for this team, they've definitely utilized him a lot more. So I think he'll be interesting. De'Ami Brown, without Noah Brown being out there for Washington, like I think he'll garner some steam and ownership there at only being 3,100. Calvin Austin will probably garner some ownership again. Didn't really have that solid of a game, but we know that Russ has looked to him on deep passes, and maybe that comes to fruition here against Philly. But with no George Pickens being out there, that's tough. The Mike Evans thing, I did want to mention, Kev, because I think he's sitting at 590 yards right now on the season. There's 4 games left. Like, is it out of the realm of possibility for him to get to that 1,000-yard mark once again?
They said they wanted to try to get him there. So,
Yeah.
or at least Baker said that.
So now we're getting into they got the Chargers this week. I think maybe we could pencil him in for around 100. And then you got Dallas, Carolina, and New Orleans to finish out the season. So like if they could get him to, 110, have him sitting at, 700 yards with 3 games left to go, like that's an interesting slate. So, we always think about those squeaky wheel narratives. I'm not sure if anything's tied to his contract or anything like that with anything, but we start to usually get those around week 17 of what guys are playing for. But we could have the writing on the wall there that they might want to get him going a little bit earlier. And yeah, he definitely stands on the page just the way that game's shaping up. But yeah, love the calls where we're at. Kev, if you had to, would you be interested in playing a Buffalo wide receiver one-off? You said you would pretty much stack it or leave it, but would you be interested in playing a Buffalo one-off? And I know you talked about Josh Allen naked, but to further that point, who would be your preferred wide receiver for Buffalo if you had to stack them with Allen on a team?
I mean, if I had to choose, it'd be Shakir, just like I said, because of the way the Lions are a slot funnel. But if I was going to play a one-off, I think it would actually be Amari Cooper, who saw a ton of targets in last week. Yeah, still really cheap,
14 targets, crazy.
He feels like someone that could catch like a long touchdown or something like that, where he could get there on his own. Where so like I don't mind getting there with Cooper or with Amari Cooper. Like if I don't love just getting a bunch of one-offs from this game. I think you can, but like I feel like it's either you go all in on it or you avoid it one way or the other. But I don't know. I don't mind like a mini stack of like a Jahmyr Gibbs though, of an Amari Cooper or something like that. I think that's kind of an interesting spot to get to.
Yeah, I just feel like that Amari Cooper game is just, it's coming, and whether we get it, with games left in the regular season, or whether I'm just gonna have to load up on him in their first playoff game of the season when that comes to fruition. It's just I just know that he's going to nuke the slate with Josh Allen one time. I mean, they brought him in for a reason, and it's going to come. So definitely want to be in on that. But yeah, fun week at wide receiver, man. We haven't even talked about like the Indy side of the game, but could be a tough matchup for Michael Pittman going against Denver there with Surtain. So like, Alec Pierce and, AD Mitchell and those guys, they're going to be a play. I mean, there's just so many different ways to go. So it's pretty much going to be, game stacking for me and trying to get, at least one of the top tier wide receivers on the lineup in some way, shape, or form because of their profiles, and then probably mixing in this mid range. But yeah, I don't know. I don't want to get to pretty much like anything under Tim Patrick at 4,300. But the way the slate's shaping up, I might have to take a shot on a guy or two if I want to get the running backs that I want.
I
Fun
do
stuff.
think. Oh, the only thing I was going to say really quick, because I know you said Dommy Brown a couple times, so I wanted to go and look it up really quick, just to kind of see like past, because Noah Brown, like over the last 4 weeks, he's ran 70% of the routes. He's drawn a 17% target share. Like he's been the number 2 wide receiver behind McLaurin. He's actually seen a higher target share over the last 4 games than Terry McLaurin has. 21%, 21% target per out run rate. But I wanted to see so what is it after that? And if Dommy Brown were to get steamed up a little bit, I mean, Luke McCaffrey has been right there with him in terms of route participation, 31%. Actually, they have pretty much split it right down the middle. They've each ran 50-plus routes. Luke McCaffrey seen looks like a higher yards per reception rate, a higher yards per target rate, like a little bit more of a down field threat, higher percentage of the air yards. Targets have been pretty similar, 10 to 7 targets between the two of them. But I'm just saying, I think like if you wanted to get a little bit interesting, like Luke McCaffrey, I guess could be like an interesting one-off play as well.
Yeah, Luke McCaffrey, or your boy Olamide Zaccheaus. I know you talked about him when he was at Atlanta on a Thanksgiving slate or two when he comes to fruition. So I always think about Mr. Olamide when he pops up, because that's the first time that I was familiar with his game. You tried to learn us on the pod for a late swap.
That was probably like Julio Jones days whenever he was there in Atlanta.
Calvin Ridley, I think. Yeah, Julio and Calvin Ridley, and one of the two were going to be out. So fun stuff, man. They also did claim KJ Osborne off of waivers, which I thought was interesting this week with Noah Brown being rolled out. So it could be another mouth to feed there. I mean, it's a short time for him to turn around and possibly learn the playbook. So I don't know if that comes to fruition this week, but yeah, definitely something to monitor going forward. Wide receiver, definitely fun this week, and one that's probably, position that's probably going to win the slate. I mean, quarterback, of course, got to get that right, but yeah, getting these wide receivers right is going to be key as well. Don't want to take any L's at that position. Let's talk about tight end, Kev, before we get into defense and wrap the pod off. And thanks for everybody joining along with us. The chat's been going strong this week. We appreciate it. And we know what time it is. Like, it's fantasy playoff time. People want their questions answered. People building up DFS lineups to get it going as we are in week 15. And we still got a lot of fun slates left, a lot of fun football. We're going to start getting into a schedule where, basically it's going to be football on every day, especially with Christmas falling, on a Wednesday this week. We're going to have Wednesday football, Monday football, Thursday football, Saturday football. Like it's just gonna be wild, man. So fun times here for those of us who like to dabble in these NFL streets and showdowns and what have you. It's gonna be fun. But from a main slate perspective, we're gonna keep it on week 15 as we break down the week 15 NFL DFS slate here on DraftKings. It's a DJ Nation podcast powered by the Fantasy Authority. Appreciate everybody. Just want to give you a quick shout. Kev, tight end is probably the ugliest it's been in a while for me. I feel like we've talked about tight ends on this pod for the past couple of weeks, and it's been so exciting, to think about who to play and look at all these sharp and strong plays that are out there. And like, even with injuries at the position, like, it is gross. Like Britton Strange is being talked about. Jordan Akins is being talked about. Like, that's not a week where I want to live in. We got Trey McBride at the top, Kelsey right behind him, then Jonnu Smith. Like, of the guys who are active, those are the only guys who are 5K and higher at the position. Then Dalton Kincaid will come right behind him, and Cade Otton, Sam Laporta, Hunter Henry, Mark Andrews. Like, I mean, it's just not a sexy slate for tight ends that are coming out. And like Stone Smart, I guess, will probably be.
Say, yeah, he's actually the number 2 most popular in terms of drawing almost 20% ownership. Stone Smart.
Okay, yeah. So like without Will Dissly there, but I mean, like, that kind of reminds me of the days of like, who is it? Like, was it Antonio Gates and Donald Parham, or whoever Donald Parham used to back up? And then it was like, oh, we'll just go to him with Phillip Rivers. And it's like, yeah, maybe it pays off, but like, I just don't know if I could get there. But it's also a slate, Kev, where I wouldn't mind getting some value into my life, in my lineups. And is that going to happen and come to fruition at the tight end position for me because of the way these things are shaping up? I do think that, I mean, Trey McBride, he's 6K. Like on a slate like this, because of I do think he's due for touchdowns, and I would absolutely play him in a Kyler Murray stack. I don't think this is a week where I get to Trey McBride as a one-off. The way that it's shaping up, I mean, 6K is just such a lot to pay for a guy who is not finding the end zone right now. And in this New England game, like just things could go so wonky. So it worries me to get to him. Kelsey is interesting at 5,700. I always have interest in playing him, especially when he's under 6K. And maybe I'll do like a mini stack there with the Cleveland side. Jonnu, I really want to get to. It's tough. It's actually kind of a tough matchup on paper. It looks like, but I don't really view tight end stats when thinking about Jonnu. They utilize them so much all over the field. So like, I definitely want to get exposure to him in my Miami Houston builds. But yeah, like I got to look to pay down. So like, if I'm not going to play the chalk, the other two guys who are interesting to me are Zach Ertz and Jake Ferguson. Zach Ertz comes in at 4K. Like, he's seen pretty consistent targets over the past couple of weeks. He's actually put up some decent numbers, of 12 between 12 and 18 fantasy points over the past few weeks. Like, yeah, okay, I could get behind that at his 4K price tag. And then Jake Ferguson coming back from the concussion, like you're gonna look at the box score against Cincinnati and only see 6 targets, but he definitely was clearly, looked to get involved. Yeah, Shoemaker was still seeing some looks on the field, but maybe they could have just been slowly working him back in. It was a weird game with some turnovers back and forth there, not a lot of possession. So, in this game against Carolina, where Carolina's favored and Dallas is playing from behind potentially, like I could get behind Jake Ferguson at 3,800 there in my life. Kev, what are you looking at the tight end position, and what cheap tight end have I not mentioned that you want to come in and bring up who's going to win everybody the money this week?
Well, so I agree, like with the value and stuff we have on this. Like that's what, like I feel like you have to go look for value at tight end this week because it's not a great tight
Yeah.
end. And what I'm seeing is like there's one tight end that I think is being overlooked that we could look at value for, and because like Stone Smart I get it because of his price. Maybe you just jam him in there. He did see 3 targets, like 50 yards. He's an athletic tight end. Maybe he gets there, but like if he's going to be coming in at like 20+% ownership, like that could go really, really sideways.
Right.
Like I think some guys you could look at, but is certainly like outside of game sacks that you could look at value this week. Patty Fry is kind of interesting. Don't really love the matchup, but I mean, maybe he gets a little bit more run. But the guy I'm talking about is Noah Gray, and he's only $3,200. And if you just look at everything, so
yeah,
like routes and everything else, so like he's running 50% of the routes. He's seeing like a 12% target share within the offense, and it's because the Chiefs are using so much 12 personnel, and Travis Kelce garners so much attention that he's running a lot of the same routes that Kelce does, but he just gets the targets because they're not looking for him. And so like Noah Gray could be somebody we could look at for some value at his cost at $3,200. But I think Zach Ertz is interesting too. He's certainly number 2 on their team in terms of routes, targets, target share. Like he's not like a sexy name. I don't think he's going to be like a guy that's going to have 5 for 100 and a score, but he certainly could get you 4 for 40 and a touchdown. And that's on this slate. Like maybe that's all you really need,
yeah,
because there's not a lot of just great tight ends on this slate. Like even someone like Mark Andrews is only 4,100, but this feels like a game where Baltimore just beats the door, blows them out, and they don't really have to throw the ball a lot. And so I don't really love that. And so maybe Sam Laporta, he's $5,400. We talked about how Buffalo really wants to keep everything in the middle of the field, so that would open things up for Sam Laporta at 4,400. But the top end guys, especially with David Njoku out, right? Or likely out.
right.
Sounds like he's not going to play. He's listed as questionable, but it sounds like he's pretty close to not playing at 5,200. Maybe you could look at Jordan Akins, who's their other tight end. He's pretty cheap as well, so you could look there if you wanted to. Though I would guess once we get full, if he's not going to play, that maybe that he gets steamed up because right now he's not drawing much ownership, but he's only $2,700.
Yeah.
And so like you could look there at Jordan Akins, but like it's just not a great tight end slate in my mind. Yes, Trey McBride has been absolutely just peppered with targets now 15, 12, and 14 the last three, but he really needs to. I mean, he hasn't really scored a touchdown. He hasn't scored a receiving touchdown, which is absolutely wild. This dude has 80 catches this year and has 0 receiving touchdowns. His touchdowns came on a rushing touchdown and a ball that was fumbled, and he put in the end zone. It's wild to me that this dude has not scored a touchdown, but he's been a monster, all things considered. But like you said, like if you really want to play all these other dudes, like it's almost impossible to get a 6K wide receiver or 6K tight end in there, in your lineup without playing like a bunch of just scrubs, 3K wide receivers, pay down it. That's not the only way you're going to be able to get there. So I don't think you really need to do it. I think you just find some of this value that's down here, a Zach Ertz, Noah Gray, something like that, maybe Jordan Akins, something like that, and just move on.
Yeah. McBride, I mean, if I'm playing that stack with Kyler and McBride, you can talk yourself into one of those New England pass catchers who's in that 3K range. And that's interesting. I'm happy CW89 came in with the Schultz call because, looking at that, like that's a fun way to play that game stack. If I'm not playing Jonnu to get to Schultz, I don't feel like it's points chasey. I mean, he, without having Stephon Diggs out there and just the way that this offense has been, like he's been a blanket for Stroud in certain situations. And, you're seeing, we like that there's 7 targets in 2 of the past 3 games. We like, how much he's utilized on the field, how much he's utilized as a pass catcher. And if this game is going to be, if we're getting more possessions, if we're getting a game that's explosive, like at 3,300, he could definitely pay off. So I do like that call. I think Schultz is very interesting this week and happy somebody brought him up.
Yeah, but he's cheap too. He's $3,300. I was just trying to look at the last 4 weeks, they played. Schultz has seen a 15% target share, which is just behind. I mean, Tank Dell's at a 17% target share. He's at 20% target per route run rate. He actually has more receptions than Tank Dell does over the last 4 games, 15 to 13 to Tank Dell. He's averaging about 45 receiving yards per game. So I don't hate it. That I don't think that's chasing at all in terms of him. Obviously, he has this one game where he has 17, which is the last time they played. And then past that, he hasn't scored double digit at all, like this entire year. It's been kind of a weird year for him. Like he's definitely seen targets. It's just he hasn't really connected or he hasn't scored a touchdown. He only has 1 touchdown all year, which is the one game where he scored 17 last week. It's the first time he found the end zone. So but I don't hate it. I mean, at cost, like I said, we're looking for value as much as we possibly can on this slate. And so, yeah, I mean, I definitely don't hate that. And that game environment, the Texans-Dolphins game to me really feels like it could be one of those games that we should have played more of this. Like maybe this game should have been more popular because this game could go nuclear.
Yeah. No, I love that game. I love that game for a reason, and I'm hoping that's the case. And I will be on the side of I played it and hopefully was able to bring something. I see a lot of people in the chat talking about Zach Ertz, and mentioned him at the top. Like Zach Ertz is a great on paper play coming in at 4K. I think it's a really sharp call, and I think that people will definitely get there in that game environment going against the Saints. He should be able to definitely reap benefits on that. Kev, let's talk about defense, man. Defense is one position where I've kind of been struggling this week, and struggling just in the sense of I'm usually okay, there's 1 or 2 that I really like, especially pay up, pay down, that I want to get to. But this week it's just where's my roster is kind of taking me, and it's the last position that I kind of put in without kind of really thinking of where I want to go. It's just all right, once I get there, I'm starting to think about it. I think for me right now, just because of my interest in the game and not taking these quarterbacks, I got to look at the Broncos first at 3,200. They're coming off of that bye. We know that, Anthony Richardson has been playing much better since getting benched, but he's kind of he's kind of like the Jekyll and Hyde, even in a way like Jameis is. Like maybe the pick sixes aren't going to be there, but it's like, that he could be prone to make some mistakes and just, not being taking care of the football. Denver is a tough place to play. They're 3,200. So they're kind of like the staple for me that I kind of get to. I mean, the Ravens being at 3,900 is just hilarious. Like I just will never find myself getting there. So they'll probably score 2 touchdowns and everybody who played them will reap the benefits. But it's like it's 3,900 for a defense. Like it just makes it so tough to get there. If the Cowboys defense was a little bit healthier, I'd have some interest in them. But just the way that they've been reeling on defense, it makes it tough at 28. So I'll probably be looking to pay down. I mean, I don't know, man. It's tough. Like I probably could be, potentially talked into. I don't even know, man. Like maybe the Patriots because of the Kyler chalk, like doesn't make me feel good, but kind of hope to get some leverage there. What say you at the defense position? Because I'm kind of struggling this week.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to Old Faithful, Arizona Cardinals. I know it didn't work out last week. Last week for them against the Seahawks, but overall, they've been a really strong defense. So since week 9, they're averaging nearly 5 sacks per game. And so here's a couple things to look at. So Drake May coming, into town, we should expect plenty of opportunities for the Cardinal team to rack up some points here because May has been sacked 3 or more times in 4 of the last 5 games, and he's turned the ball over in 5 straight games. And so they've also allowed the 6th most DK points to opposing defenses this year. The Patriots have. So the Cardinals are 3K. A little bit more than like minimum defenses, but still, I think the Cardinals are certainly in play. I think it's a good spot too if you want to play Connor and the Cardinals defense. I like that at 3K quite a bit. I think that the Commanders are a little bit more expensive, but obviously Jay Kaner, who one thing he's very bad at, he holds the ball for a very long time. So I do think the Commanders are a spot we could definitely look at. So right now, I mean, they're top 10 in pressure rate this year, top 10 in sacks this year, top 12 in sacks, I should say. They haven't had a lot of turnovers, only 9.2% turnover rate on offensive drives, but still, you're talking about, Jay Kaner, a quarterback that we're not obviously worried about whatsoever, could certainly turn the ball over a few times here in this game. So the Commanders, I think you could look there as well. Now, if you want to pay down, I think you could look at the Browns because so the Chiefs obviously offer their offensive line has just been, Patrick Mahomes has just been under duress this entire time. And the Chiefs have been not one to just try to give them help. They might try to chip. That's about it. But Myles Garrett could have a field day back there with this offensive line. I don't know if DJ Humphries is going to play. So we're back to the Wanya Morris experience. And that has not been a good experience for anybody. They are just get absolutely harassed. And so $2,200, Browns, like the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, he's been sacked like 15 times over the last 3 games. Like, I don't hate it. And so at $2,200, we know the Chiefs games have kind of been gross and in the mud. Like, and if the weather is a factor here, like the Browns at $2,200, especially with their offensive line issues, like, I don't hate it. Like, if you're wanting to pay down, I don't think it's one that's like going to burn you or kill you. Like, I don't expect the Chiefs to come out and just lay the wood to the Browns all of a sudden. They haven't done it all year. They've been really close scoring games. He hasn't done it lately. He's been much better about taking care of the football, not turning it over. But we know Patrick Mahomes at times does some dumb things and makes some some dumb decisions. So $2,200 Browns, like I don't hate that going there. So I think you could look as a very cheap play. You could look at that.
Yeah, I can't argue that call, and it looks like some systems are going to have them projected pretty highly at ownership, which is weird, but yeah, I mean they can definitely tee off against a struggling offensive line. That front seven is legit. CW89 talking about the Cowboys D and fade the Chuba chalk. Like, yeah, I think that is possibly your angle of taking it, that we get the Bryce Young that we saw earlier this year potentially against an opportunistic defense. But this is also defense that they're missing Overshown now. They have shown the propensity to give up big plays. Bryce Young is playing a lot better, getting out the ball quicker, and Chuba is just as well. You could talk about fading the Chuba chalk, but like if Chuba, goes out there and kind of wrecks against this defense and they're not making plays, could be a long day for them. So makes it tough for me to get to at that price tag. But that would be the leverage there of playing that D. Kev, what do you go ahead?
The only thing I would say is just this: is that so since week 10, the Cowboys they are tied with the Broncos with 16 sacks. They trail only the Texans and Vikings in interceptions, and are 5th in forced fumbles since that time. So I don't hate the call. This is the only thing I will say though with the Panthers is the Panthers' offensive line is one thing that doesn't get any credit for this year. But the Panthers' offensive line has been phenomenal. They are last in the league in terms of pressure rate allowed. They aren't giving up much sacks. Like they've done a very good job in that, right? So, like, while I think the Cowboys have done a very good job recently, like I don't hate the call at $2,800, but this also isn't necessarily the Panthers team that you really want to attack when it comes to that because they have done a very good job in a lot of those things. Like their offensive line, which they completely revamped over the offseason, has been huge for them this year.
Yeah, no, they're trying to even with everything that they've given up over the past couple of years, they're trying to right the ship and get it back on track. So Panthers turnaround this season has looked nice. And who's Canales? Yeah, Dave Canales down there has done a pretty phenomenal job on turning the narrative around this team and what was looking like to foregone conclusion at the beginning of the season. Like this team would be probably picking, in the top 3 again, and they possibly still could, but like it's definitely changed around the narrative for the better. Kev, what do you say we build a lineup, man, and get on out of here for the people? Shout out to everybody who's been rocking along with the DJ Nation podcast, powered by the Fantasy Authority. It's been myself, Ryan Williams, and Kevin Steele coming at you on this Friday night as we would talk about this Week 15 main slate. Filling in for Maddie. He won't be in the build for us, so it's just me and you, Kev, building a lineup like old times, man. Why don't you go ahead and start it, and I'll let you start next week as well too when Maddie comes back and give you the back-to-back ability to build the lineup out for the people.
Let's go Tua. I want to build this game stack.
All right, let's do it. Let's go Tyreek Hill just right away.
Well, we got to go Nico.
All right, so I mean, let's have the conversation because I would want to play H.N. He's been so good. His role has been so important to this team moving the ball. Is there any way that we could play a 2 double without Devon?
I think you'd have to have him in there.
Yeah, I agree. So let's put him in. So this is 4,100 per position left, and we need a running back, tight end, wide receiver, flex, and defense.
Well, let's get some of this value out of the way. I'm just going to go down and play the Browns at $2,200.
All right, and let's keep going value at tight end, and let's just make it a double run back with Dalton Schultz. So just for playing those 2 guys, Kev, that takes us to $5,000 remaining per player for a running back, wide receiver, and flex. So that makes it a lot more interesting now.
I'm going to go Brian Robinson at $6,200. So wide receiver and a flex, $4,400 remaining.
So probably out on the top running backs that we were talking about, just to be able to get to them. Let's see here. 4,400 left if we're talking about receivers. Let's see.
Is there a $3,500 or below wide receiver you like?
I mean, I could get behind Booty. I could get behind, but I don't really love them necessarily. What?
Yeah, I
Okay,
was
let's
trying to
just
look at because I was like, well, we could play like Amari Cooper in the
yeah.
flex as kind of a late night hammer at $5,300, but we'd have to find a $3,500 wide receiver to play.
Let's see if we go. Oh my god, I thought we could do Cooper and Patrick, but yeah, I'm gonna switch it. I'm gonna switch it to Stone Smart just to give us a little bit more leeway here to work with, and
4,200.
let's try. Let's see if there's anybody you like at 41, Kev. Let's try getting Thielen in there at 5,400. Man, I thought it would be once you started talking about Brown's defense, I was like, man, this will free up some stuff to get to at 2,200, but fuck, it's tough this week.
It is. It's because like I said, Achan, Tyreek, and Colin or Nico are so expensive. It eats up most of your salary. I don't mind like a guess, like maybe like a Parker Washington, but it feels pretty thin. Obviously they're missing so many pieces there. Who the hell else are they gonna throw the ball to? I guess.
Yeah, true.
You could plug in like a Mark Andrews, but man, I don't know.
No, I don't like that. One of the Pittsburgh guys, I guess, could be interesting. Calvin Austin didn't do it last week. Mike Williams was missed on a couple, but these guys are both under 4K.
I guess we could do. I really hate this. A little mini stack of Thielen and Jake Ferguson.
2 tight end.
Yeah, but I really don't like doing 2 tight ends on the slate. But it's about all you can do. Unless you're going to. The only way to really clear significant, it would be like dropping from Tyreek down to like Waddle or something.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Devon Vele?
Oh, I don't mind him at all. I think it's. He's been pretty solid. But we don't have enough. He's 42.
Well, let's swap to if we do Cooper, if we do Amari, we can get to Vele. So let's plug this in for right now. Uses all the salary. We'll play around with it, but yeah, it's a tough slate to build around when you're going to high price options, which is why we're seeing the cheaper stacks become very popular this week to be able to pay up at other spots because you could be looking at some thin value. But we're gonna roll with this. It's a Tua stack, Tua, Devon H, and Tyreek Hill with Brian Robinson, Nico Collins as a run back. Nico Collins is a run back, but then also Brian Robinson Jr., Amari Cooper at 5,300 with Devon Vele, both going in that late window. And then Stone Smart with the Browns D is going to wrap it up. And that is going to be our Millie lineup for the people. And right around, because we're going back and forth there, Kev, we're right around the 90-minute mark this week, even without Maddie. So, fun slate to talk about, a fun slate to really dive into. It's going to be insane. I don't know if we'll get I don't even remember what the scores were, but I think I saw like some 270s, 280s, 290s like shipping GPPs last week, which is absolutely insane. Highest score scoring fantasy DFS fantasy week that I can remember, which makes it fun. So we'll be curious to see where the scores are coming in at this week. But I expect to see some high scores as well with the way it's shaping up. Kev, any final words for the people before we sign off for this week 15 breakdown?
No, I think it's going to be a fun slate. And, I wonder too, if maybe because I feel like everybody's going to be going stars and scrubs on this slate because that's why we're seeing the Stone Smarts and the some of these guys that are really popular this week because they're super cheap, like the Browns, trying to shove them in there, maybe trying to figure out a way to get more of a just a balanced build instead of it could be just a way just to get different this week in some of this. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting to kind of play around with this week, but I definitely love, like I said, this Miami Houston game environment, figuring out a way to mess around with because you have to have some, some ownership on the Lions and Bills game because that game could go nuclear. But there's some really fun game environments I think on this slate. So I'm sure we'll come back and this will be a horrible scoring slate. And the top score will be 190, and so
yeah. And if that's the case, just pray you have your lineup in where the game environment goes nuclear. And that's one thing we always talk about here. It's if you're gonna bank on a game environment, you get multiple pieces from that game because on a slate where not a lot goes right, if you have that winning formula, then that's gonna skyrocket your teams to not just pick off all these one-off pieces. So don't be afraid to stack and overstack a game environment. It's gonna be a fun week 15 slate, and we're gonna be looking forward to the week 16 main slate. We hopefully get Maddie back in the seat to be able to break that down for you guys. It's gonna be a fun one as we continue on in the fantasy playoffs, continue on closer to the best time of the year. You see that background if you're watching on YouTube. It's a Christmas. We're gonna have some fun Christmas stuff to talk about and Christmas football this year to talk about, which is going to be exciting. So a lot going on here at TFA, a lot going on for the DJ Nation podcast, and that's going to do it. That's going to do it for this week 15 breakdown. So again, shout out to everybody who is rocking along with us this week. We appreciate everybody who's taken some time to watch on the YouTube live. We love that. If you want to get in on the action, hop in that Discord. Link is in the description on YouTube. On your podcast, make sure you're following that link. Follow the Fantasy Authority on X and Twitter at @FF_authority, and you can catch Kevin Steele, the Godfather himself of the Fantasy Authority, at Fantasy Rat 13 on X and Twitter. I'm Ryan Williams at Ryan Alexander_W on X and Twitter, and we'll catch you guys next week for the Week 16 main slate breakdown. But until then, get this money. Peace.